Hi, my name is Stacey Goldring. Welcome to another chapter and notes book discussion. We have a lot to cover. I'm going to try to get through so much in the time we have together because I have another book club I have to do right after this. So the book we're going to talk about today is Tony Horwitz's Spying on the South. And this is a great book. I don't know if you can see it. Let me make sure that you can see it. Okay. Boink. Okay, there it is. Look at that pretty cover. Very, very patriotic. Isn't that lovely? Okay. Yeah. All right. So this is not Confederates in the Attic. That's his most popular book. But we're going to talk about spying on the South. Why? Because I love nature. And I know it sounds super weird, but I also love Civil War history. Oh, sorry, that's the sound of very large airplanes taking off. So I apologize if you hear that in advance, but I call that the sound of freedom, and we're very grateful. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to discuss Spying on the South by Tony Horwitz. I want to say Horowitz, but it's Horwitz. I like to think about book discussions as almost akin to what this book does, which it also talks about the beauty of what Frederick Law Olmsted gave to public parks. Public parks are a place where people can come together from anywhere because it's public. And you can have an exchange of ideas, a hello, toss a frisbee, sit next to one another on a bench, read a book, have a picnic, play softball, whatever it is, take a nice walk on a trail. Whatever it is, it's ecumenical. And that's what I think books give us, the opportunity to come together and discuss books and have an equal exchange of ideas. End of story. So I hope right now you leave all the chaos behind you, whatever's going on in the world, whenever you watch this, because trust me, there is so much crazy going on in the world. And just spend a few minutes with me as we dive into Spying on the South by Tony Horwitz. I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. If you haven't yet, please like, subscribe, hit the whatever buttons, and do all the YouTube things that one does. Okay, so what is this book about? So Tony Horwitz, American journalist, decides to take a deep dive into what America was like pre-Civil War, the antebellum days. Big deal, right? We've had so many books on the Civil War, but he does this through the vehicle of Frederick Law Olmsted. What? Yes, Frederick Law Olmsted. Central Park guy? Yes, Frederick Law Olmsted, because in addition to being this incredible landscape designer, he was the first landscape architect, at least in America. He was a reporter, amongst many other things. Who knew, right? Well, if you read Confederates in the Attic, maybe you knew. I haven't read that book. Maybe he discusses it in there. Not sure, but anyway, keeping on task. What Horwitz does is we take parallel journeys of Horwitz revisiting the route that Olmsted took in the antebellum years leading up to the war. So that's what we're going to do kind of in this discussion. I'm going to kind of be your tour guide of did you know along the way, because actually each chapter of the book, how Tony, like we're on first name terms, sets it up. May he rest in peace. More about that later. We learn about different interesting facts about the United States, about slavery, about who we are as Americans, why we made the decisions we make, and why we are in the conundrum we are today. It's all reflected in this book as he takes not planes, trains, and automobiles, but as he goes on steamboat, barge, train, horse, throughout the United States. So I'm just going to dig right in, and if you happen to belong to a book club, I'm going to give you some great discussion questions that you can share if you decide to have this book as part of your book club lineup that'll really get your gears going for your book club members. So, book club questions. Did you know anything about Frederick Law Olmsted or Tony Horwitz prior to reading the book? And if you did know about Frederick Law Olmsted, is there a chance you learned about him by reading the amazing book by Erik Larson called Devil in the White City? I'm just curious. Let me know in the comments below. Were you aware of Olmsted's journalism background? Did you know that he was known for much more than landscape design? Have you read anything else by Horwitz? Did you know he's married to Geraldine Brooks? My God, small world. Okay. If so, I want to know what you thought about the book. In this case, you can leave your notes. You can leave your comments in the comment section below. Is there something in particular that stuck out to you about that book? I'm curious, as I read this book, Olmsted talks about, Horwitz brings to light that Olmsted talks about how he thought the best way to free the slaves would go, which is a really cruddy way to say his plan for emancipating the slaves. He had this gradual plan that I don't know if it was a very good idea or it was paternalistic, but it gives you a great contextual view of how someone from the North felt about slavery, going in, not knowing that a civil war was right around the corner, because these adventures that Olmsted took when he traveled throughout the United States on a journalism assignment from the New York Daily Times, now known as the New York Times, took place from 1861 to 1863 or 4. I don't know. It's a numbers thing. Doesn't matter. Okay. Actually, if you do get the hard copy of the book, the real book, as opposed to the Kindle, they do give you a map. And I like this book. I think the pages feel good. I think the cover feels good. The tactile stuff's so important to some of us. But it's now I have to find the map. Oh, good one, Stacey. Trust me, there's a map. Okay. Anyhow, where was I? So we're going, so we're following that trail. Anyway, I also didn't know anything about Texas, and I'm kind of married to a Texan, but I didn't know anything about Texas and its history until reading this book. And there are so many aha moments if you don't know anything about Texas. And even if you know a lot about Texas, this is a great way to learn more about Texas, because no wonder they're so proud of their individuality. And I'm making a great generalization here because I know like a handful of people from Texas, and technically none of them were even born there. So really, what is a Texan? But that's another story, because going and viewing Texas through the eyes of Olmsted and his brother, absolutely fascinating, this book. So the question is, if you're doing a book club, did you know the history of Texas? Did this book enlighten you in any way? Okay, moving on. What did you think about how Olmsted interacted with the people he met along the way versus how Horwitz reacts with people he meets along the way? All right, so here are going into, now we're going to go into the did you know section. So here are a few did you knows about the book. You will learn the origin of Simon Legree from Harriet Beecher Stowe's book, Uncle Tom's Cabin, if you read this book, which I found fascinating. We've all heard of Angola Prison. You will learn the origins of that. I had no idea that Frederick Law Olmsted influenced Audubon Park, which is in the beautiful New Orleans. I had no idea that the Marx Brothers film Duck Soup, where it's set in the country of Fredonia. Well, that was a little bit of an actual place in Texas, of course. And who would think you'd run into the Marx Brothers reading a book about the lead up to the Civil War? But that just goes to show you anything's possible in America, and anything's possible when you read a book. Okay. I also learned the origin, reference, and where nachos came into being. Okay, go figure. So these are just a few of the weird things that you'll come across. I'm not even scratching the surface, but trust me, it's worth reading, if anything, to go, oh my gosh, I had no idea, which I said aloud and to myself throughout reading this book. And I also listened to the book. So I kind of, double dipped. So I think it was, I'm very glad Tony doesn't read the book, because God bless him, he does the introduction on Audible, but I like the guy's voice on Audible. It's very soothing, very soothing. All right. So writing style. What type of writing style is this book? It's categorized as many things. The first is gonzo journalism. So what is that? Hunter S. Thompson coined this phrase in the early 70s, may have been 1970, depending on your source. But basically, it's like a personal kind of journalism, which kind of makes me go like this. But it's a type of journalism that uses the first person. It's much more common nowadays. In the 70s, it was not, because journalism was about being objective. Imagine that. Objective, but gonzo journalism is when you just kind of jumped right in the trenches, and the author, the writer, the journalist becomes a part of the story. We get to crawl into the mind of the author and experience the story as the author is experiencing it and thinking about it. Today, a very common form of writing, but that's a category that this is considered. It's also considered like, it's called a picaresque, excuse me, because I try this morning. And also, can I just mention, I'm dressed like this and we're in Florida and it's March, completely unacceptable. I'm very disappointed when I woke up this morning. So this is very hot coffee. All right. Gonzo journalism, first-person journalism, also considered picaresque. And when I say picaresque, think of Voltaire's Candide, Don Quixote, Huck Finn. I know these aren't, these are all fiction, clearly. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So you have two guys kind of on a trip, and they're going from place to place, and we're just seeing life unfold through their eyes. There's some other books that I can also recommend if you like this type of writing, journalism, genre, that are similar. One is A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson. The other is one of my favorite books, Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck. I can't recommend that highly enough. And if it happens to be summer when you're listening to this, I suggest you pick up a copy immediately. You just might want to hit pause and call your local bookstore or text or email, whatever you do, and say, I would like Travels with Charlie. Look, this is me because I'm old. I would like Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck. And they will say, okay, we will get that for you. And you will be set. All right. Well, now we're moving on. We're now going to talk about why Tony Horwitz would write about the South. He was always attracted to the Civil War because his family, his father, and ultimately his grandfather were also very interested in the Civil War. And we'll get more into that when I go deeper into his bio. But for now, just know that and realize that the South is almost an enigma to me. And Horwitz dives into that, and ultimately it serves as a major theme of the book. But he talks about what he experiences as he retraces the steps of the antebellum South through Olmsted. And these are some of his takeaways. A Southern racial divide still exists. Idolatry of the Confederacy continues with its heritage and ideology. And Southern culture is something all of its own, which and living in Florida and being from the North, I can attest to that. So what do I mean by Southern racial divides still exist? What both Olmsted and Horwitz find is that despite living in the same town, each group that they run into, they have separate lives, separate holidays. There's no cross-pollination. And the Civil War is viewed in very different terms. Known as the war, what did they call it? The War of Northern Aggression, or the Lost Cause. We have the symbolism of the Confederate flag, and particularly over these past few years, the symbolism, the statues taking on new interpretation and new meanings. A lot of people use this Southern culture, Southern heritage as a ruse for disgusting, ugly, despicable, vomitous racism. So that exists, and that's a problem. Ultimately, the Civil War is still not resolved. So as I come to you today in March of 2023, nope, it's still happening. It's still happening. All right. Slavery. Many in the South seem to romanticize history. They glorify the antebellum years, and the Civil War as something that almost seems like out of a romantic period, and that's clearly a problem. We don't even call the names of the battles the same names. Manassas and Manassas II. I grew up calling the Battle of Bull Run. We have divides. The idea of slavery and the role that it played in religion and in the economy. I mean, it cannot be denied that slavery, the South say that, slavery fueled the economy. It made the economy possible. Whereas where Olmsted did his study, where he found that it was actually 4 times more expensive to make a thing, a widget or whatever, using slave labor versus manual paid labor. The South was clearly still profiting exponentially from the idea of enslaving and dehumanizing human beings. Through Olmsted's adventures, going from town to town, we get to see how people viewed slavery and what, the moral choices they made with this darkest period of American history. It's just it's a profound pox. I'm just going to leave it at that because I want to continue on, but it is obviously a great theme in the book that resonates today. There was some other terms. Well, there's one term that I came across in the book, and I thought, I don't know. You hear it, but you're not sure if people know even what it is. So the Mason-Dixon line, right? This is mentioned in the book. And growing up, I thought the Mason-Dixon line was the name of a trucking company. I'll kid you not. But what is the Mason-Dixon line? Well, I'm gonna tell you. First of all, it separates states. Can you name the states? I could not. They are Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and West Virginia, which was part of Virginia until 1863. It was surveyed in 1763 to 1767 by 2 men, you can guess their names, Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon. It was to resolve some state border issues. So that's the origins of the Mason-Dixon line. And I don't even know if that trucking company still exists, but if it still does, I wonder if they ask people when they apply for jobs, if they know the origin of the term Mason-Dixon line. But now you do, and trust me, it'll be on Jeopardy at some point. All right. Another thing I came across, which made me think only in America, was a town along the Mississippi River where we run into some great American pop culture called the Mothman. The Mothman evidently was seen, a very large creature flying through this town and scaring people late at night, and it made the newspaper in the town. And so this was in Point Pleasant, so put that on your list of places to go, West Virginia, and its first sighting was in 1966. A couple, and here's the headline from the Point Pleasant Register: couple sees man-sized bird creature something. And I'll just read you the first bits, the first bit of the article. It was a bird or something. It definitely wasn't a flying saucer. Two Point Pleasant couples said today they encountered a man-sized bird-like creature in the TNT area about midnight last night, at about 2:00 in the morning. So this sighting took on a life all of its own. And now this town in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, has a whole tourism industry based on the Mothman. There was actually a book written in 2009 called The Mothman Prophecies. And so I had to dive a little deeper into that. And the author, John Keel, who passed away in 2009, was a journalist, and he was also either a Fortean or a Fortean author. So it's Fortean. And what is that? That genre means you write about the paranormal. So who knew? Another genre that I did not know the name of until I read this book. So that's why I just love books. So anyway, it's a very funny article. If you decide to become a member of Chapter Endnotes, you will have access to the complete video library where I go into much more detail laughing about that story. All right, so what do we know? We know what the book is about. Basically, this is a book where you could pick up and read one chapter and feel complete. So if you are someone who, likes a short story, do not be intimidated by all the pages, because it's built on several chapters, and you can just pick one chapter, read it, and feel really good that you completed something, right? So who wrote this book? I want to talk a little bit more about the background of our author, and then, time permitting, I will just glance the surface, just the topsoil layer of Frederick Law Olmsted. So Anthony Laudner Horwitz was born in 1958 in DC. His father was a neurosurgeon. His mother, Eleanor, was a writer. And like I said earlier, he developed a fascination with the South's myths and history. And as a child, he wrote about the Civil War. He even constructed a mural of the major battles on a wall in his attic. So this kid really liked it. He went to and graduated from all the right smart people places. He was alumnus of the DC Sidwell Friends School. He graduated from Brown, Phi Beta Kappa, history major with a master's degree. And then, of course, he goes to Columbia's J School, journalism school. His interest, like I said, was passed down through generations. And when his father retired from being a neurosurgeon, his dad took an interest in Civil War medicine, which is so fascinating. So they would go to conferences together and things. In 1984, he marries Australian writer Geraldine Brooks. She wrote March and all those other, the Gilead, all these books. And they have two children. This book is dedicated to her. In 1987, he wrote One for the Road, A Hitchhiker's Outback, 99, Baghdad Without a Map. He wins an award for the Pulitzer in 1995, writing for the Wall Street Journal about low-wage working conditions. Also, he wrote for the New Yorker. He was a foreign correspondent covering just all the continents. He continues writing in 2004. Is this what it is? No, in 2011, he writes Midnight Rising, John Brown and the Raid That Sparked Civil War, America Forever. He wrote this and self-published it. And then he wrote about his self-publishing experience. I too self-published 150 years ago, and that in its infancy. And it's interesting to see how far the self-publishing world has come. That book was On Wooden Wheels. Anyway, so he goes on, he's writing, he's lecturing. In 2019, he writes Spying on the South, an Odyssey Across the American Divide. And then, I mean, this is like the charmed writing life. And imagine these gigs and where he was educated, what he wrote about. He just like was a citizen journalism man of the planet, just amazing. He went to Radcliffe College, where the Radcliffe College Center as a study fellow. And then in 2019, he collapsed while walking in DC. He was in the middle of a book tour for this book, and he had a heart attack and passed away. So a life too short, too short. He was the past president of the Society of American Historians. So this group so kindly, so generously set up a prize, the Tony Horwitz Prize for distinguished work in American history. And they established this in 2020. He is all over the internet, the worldwide tube. You can go to his website. I think it's still active. He has appearances on CNN, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. I don't have a lot of time to get into Frederick Law Olmsted, so I'm just going to make it quick. What a visionary. If you are someone who is afraid to make mistakes, you need to know about Frederick Law Olmsted, because this guy, nothing stopped him. Here is a quote from the New York books.com, an article I found from 2005, it was a review of another book. And this is how, I think the book was called Frederick Law Olmsted, America's Green Giant. And here's how the author describes Olmsted: experimental farmer, prolific journalist, crusading publisher, military healthcare reformer, insightful social critic. Olmsted was also the greatest advocate and impresario of the public realm this history has ever produced. Impresario of the public realm this country has ever produced. This guy was a polymath who failed at so many things, yet the imprint he has made on you and me, every time we take a walk in a public park, you got to look at every tree and say, thank you, Frederick Law Olmsted, because it's thanks to him we have the public in park. That snoring is my dog, Coco, if you can hear her, and I apologize for that. It's an issue. All right. He was the one who decided that America needs public spaces to come together. There is such a divide between the rich and the poor, and through nature can be the great equalizer. The environment of nature can bring us together. Like I said at the beginning, this was a new thing. We didn't have national parks. He was influential in that too, as well as Teddy Roosevelt or Roosevelt. I never know. He was so integral. And if you've been to Central Park, you know how beautiful it is and how you don't even realize you're in the city. And my God, you can get lost in there. But he gave us public spaces inspired and supported by nature. He gave us the world's cheapest therapy. I don't know if you can hear her, but it is absolutely ridiculous. Coco, shh. Okay. Very briefly, because I've got a hard stop in like 9 minutes. Okay, so very briefly, a little bit about his background. His family has been here since the 1600s. They came from Essex, England. He was born in 1822 in Hartford, Connecticut. Everyone lives in Hartford, Connecticut. Mark Twain, Harriet Beecher Stowe, all the good things seem to be in Hartford. It's just amazing. Okay, it must be the water. Okay, so his father was a prosperous merchant, meaning it's very easy to make mistakes if financially someone is there to support you and pick you up and just say, try something else. Financially, Don't worry about it. You're covered. What a dream. And Olmsted had that. He had a brother named John, who was his very closest friend. And unfortunately, John died of TB as a young man. His mother, Charlotte Law Olmsted, died, depending on your source, when he was 4 years old. He does have a memory of his mother outside, either sewing or reading, depending on your source, by a tree. That's like his only memory of his mother. So his father remarries in 1827. His mother had a love of nature. His stepmother and his father continued that love of nature. And that starts to plant the seeds. It's cues upon on him appreciating the beauty that comes from nature, the energy that comes from nature. I'm looking at all the trees and they're just so stunning. Do you know what I learned? I've just had a little coffee. I've learned that the average tree has 250,000 leaves. I don't know about all at once, but I heard that number and I thought that is a miracle. And if you think about all the trees everywhere, oh my God, I can never be sad again. You'd think. But anyway, that is, so if you leave with anything today, you leave with that. And I can't even source it because I can't remember where I heard it from, but I think it was on C-SPAN, but I'm not sure. It could have been on a podcast. Moving on. All right. So where are we? Okay. So father remarries. They have more children. His education was kind of, for lack of a better term, hippy dippy and cruel. He was either at a school where it was kind of meh, or he was sent away to another school where basically he was used as child labor. He unfortunately gets sumac poisoning early in life, which they think is a cause of some temporary blindness he gets, because that would hurt. And that temporary blindness happens again in his life, that research now for me coming to you today says could be induced by stress. He wasn't accepted to Yale, but he went to Yale for a few classes and to hang out with his friends. But it just, square hole round peg didn't work. He was basically a wanderer. He just couldn't find a job he liked. He was a surveyor. His dad got him a desk job. That didn't work out. He did merchant marines. He ends up in China. That didn't go well. He tried publishing. That failed. This failed. But, his dad was there. Then he helps found The Nation magazine. Pretty impressive. And then he goes to work for the New York Daily Times. His father makes it possible for him to settle on a farm on Staten Island in 1848. That's where we get the term, what they say, that whatever farmer. Anyway, in 1857, if you keep up with numbers, because I certainly can't, but I have friends that do, that's the only reason why I put them in. His brother, unfortunately, dies of TB while he's traveling in Europe. In 1859, he marries Mary Cleveland Perkins Olmsted, the widow of his brother. Now, relax, because they really did fall in love. And his brother said, please take care of my wife, Mary, and he promised he would. He adopts their 3 children. They have 2 more sons who die in infancy, but then they also have 2 more children. In 1850, right before, so this is before he gets married, he travels to England and he visits public gardens, and he's impressed with a park in Liverpool called Birkenhead, which is said to be the influence for Central Park. He then begins to write. He wrote a book called Walks and Talks of the American Farmer in England. It is this piece where the New York Times picks him up and says, we would like you to do a research journey on the American South in Texas. An amazing gig, right? Can you even imagine? So that's what he does. He ends up writing 3 books, A Journey to the Seaboard Slave States in 1956, A Journey Through Texas in 1857. So the dates at the beginning weren't exactly right that I told you. A Journey to the Backcountry in the Winter, 1853 to 1854. And then he puts them all together in a compendium you may have heard of called The Cotton Kingdom, which, P.S., when it was published in London, it actually influenced this book. It actually influenced Britain to support the Union. That's influence. Okay. he had, what are some of the takeaways he had just reading? In his words, slavery is inefficient. And here's, he says, it takes a set amount of work, took 4 times as long in Virginia as it did in the North. The South was backward economically and socially. The profits of slavery were enjoyed by no more than 8,000 owners of large plantations. A somewhat larger group had about the standard of living of New York City policemen, but the proportion of free white men who were as well off as Northern working men was small. Slavery meant that the proportion of men improving their conditions was much less than any Northern community, and that the natural resources of the land were strangely unused, and it was a poor economy. I'm going to stop there because I don't want to mess up any copyright issues. Like I said, his father was always very supportive. He met a friend, and, oh my gosh, I got to cut out of here in like 3 minutes. He met a friend of his who had known from way back, was a friend who introduced him to someone named Calvert Vaugh. Between the two of them, Calvert said, I need to submit some plans for Central Park competition, and lo and behold, they won. I believe that it's probably what ultimately ended up killing him because it was so political, but it was surely his masterpiece, although he didn't view it that way. He felt some other parks preceded that, but they called it the Greens Ward Plan, something else that could be on jeopardy. The original name for Frederick Law Olmsted Central Park was the Greens Ward Plan. Anyway, during the Civil War, he had to stop work on Central Park, and he became the commissioner of the executive secretary of the U.S. Sanitary Commission, a precursor to the Red Cross. So if someone after a battlefield, here he'd come out on the field with soup and bandages and doctors and nurses, and he was responsible for all of this. He was responsible for thousands of employees while he built Central Park. He also was on a gold mining project in California for this newly established mine that eventually it bankrupted the mine because he said, we need to set aside this land. It has to be a national park. And eventually this leads to the establishment of Yosemite Valley and the Mariposa Grove land grants. So just a few of his landscape designs that he has done. Some are said to be attributed to him, but aren't. But I'm just going to go through a few. Prospect Park, which he thought was his most brilliant design. Chicago's Riverside Park, Buffalo, New York's park system, Milwaukee, Wisconsin's Grand Necklace of Parks, the Niagara Falls, hello. He also did designs with Henry Hobson Richardson, including the Buffalo State Asylum, the Hudson River State Hospital for the Insane in Poughkeepsie. He then established his full-time landscape architect firm in Brookline, Massachusetts called Fairstead, and you can go visit that today if you want. Boston's Emerald Necklace. If you've ever been to Wellesley, Smith, Stanford, or University of Chicago, you can thank him. And if you read Eric Larson's Devil in the White City, of course, you know about the World's Fair. Unfortunately, he got Alzheimer's later in life, and he ended up being admitted to one of the hospitals where he passed away, where he actually had some influence on the landscape design. And with that in mind, I'm going to say thank you so much. I hope you will pick up a copy of Spying on the South by Tony Horwitz. And I hope you'll join me. We also have The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearn coming up. I don't know if you can see that, but I hope so. And then finally, this season will wrap with Shakespeare and Company by the amazing Sylvia Beach. I love this book. All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.